If you opened your smartphone right now and you saw 25 heavy apps running simultaneously in the background, you would swipe them closed immediately.
Oh, absolutely. Without a second thought.
Right, because you know exactly what happens if you don't. The battery drains rapidly, the phone gets incredibly hot to the touch, everything starts lagging, and eventually, well, the whole operating system just crashes.
Totally gives up.
Exactly. Okay, let's unpack this because today we're doing a deep dive into the science of stress, physical health, and coping. And the mission of this deep dive is to decode exactly how stress is acting like those hidden background apps in your own body and mind, quietly draining your resources.
It's a phenomenal way to visualize it, honestly,
Yeah.
especially considering we regularly treat our biological hardware with far less care than we do our personal electronics.
We really do. We just expect our bodies to keep up. So we're drawing from a comprehensive academic text on behavioral medicine to uncover the evidence-based secrets to building resilience so you can navigate your demanding life without completely burning out.
And to understand why those hidden apps are so draining, we really have to look at the evolutionary mismatch of modern stress. Our neural circuits, the alarm systems in our brains, they were hardwired for survival.
Right, like running from a predator.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they haven't seen a significant biological software update in, about 10,000 years.
Yeah.
So to your ancient primitive brain, waking up to a notification that you have 32 unread emails from your boss triggers the exact same physiological survival sequence as a physical predator stepping out of the brush.
Which is pretty wild when you actually stop to think about it. I mean, an email from your boss isn't going to literally eat you.
Usually not, no.
Right. So if the brain is treating a flooded inbox like a hungry tiger, why are some modern stressors so much more destructive than others? Like, why does one difficult conversation ruin your entire week while a massive project at work might actually make you feel energized?
Well, the difference lies entirely in the architecture of the threat. The research identifies 3 core variables that dial up the intensity of a stress response. Those are controllability, predictability, and duration.
Okay, so let's start with controllability.
Right. When you remove a person's ability to influence their outcome, the biological toll just skyrockets. There's this foundational, though, I'll warn you, kind of difficult to hear behavioral experiment that proves this, known as the learned helplessness paradigm.
Oh, is this the one with the dogs in the shuttle box?
Yes, that's the one. So researchers placed dogs into an enclosure with 2 compartments separated by a small barrier. The floor on one side could deliver a mild shock. Usually a dog will simply jump over the barrier to the safe side.
Which makes sense. You feel a shock, you move.
Exactly. But the researchers found that if a dog had previously been in a situation where shocks were entirely inescapable, where literally no action they took made any difference, they didn't even try to jump.
Oh, wow. They just gave up.
They just lay down. They had quite literally rewired their brains to believe they were completely helpless.
That is heartbreaking to picture, but applying that to human beings, it explains so much about chronic burnout, doesn't it?
It really does.
When people feel trapped in a toxic work environment or a deeply dysfunctional relationship, they eventually just stop trying to fix it or escape.
That loss of control is the exact trigger for deep psychological exhaustion.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the second variable, which is predictability. Knowing if and when something adverse is going to happen dramatically cushions the blow.
Even if you still have absolutely no control over the event itself.
Precisely. Think about a hurricane warning. You cannot stop the hurricane, but the warning gives you a window to board up your house. The act of preparing, driven by the predictability of the threat, actually lowers the psychological devastation of the event.
Wait, I have to push back on the predictability thing for a second. Because isn't total predictability kind of agonizing?
What do you mean?
Well, I'm thinking about a horror movie. Unpredictable stress is like a sudden jump scare. It spikes your heart rate for a second, but then it's over. But the slow, predictable tension of seeing the monster slowly walking down the hallway, dragging a weapon, isn't that drawn-out anticipation way worse for your brain?
What's fascinating here is that it feels like it should be, but biologically, the brain overwhelmingly prefers the monster it can see coming.
Wait, really? Why?
Let's look at the metabolic cost of vigilance. Predictable aversive events allow an organism to completely relax right up until the warning signal. They know they are safe for now.
Oh, I see. So you're not constantly looking over your shoulder.
Right. But if you have no idea when that jump scare is going to happen, your nervous system has to maintain a state of constant, exhausting hyperarousal. You are burning massive amounts of energy just keeping your guard up. When you have a warning, you conserve your resources until the exact moment you need them to survive.
So it's the difference between knowing your boss only sends aggressive emails at 9 in the morning on Mondays versus knowing they might text you randomly at 2 in the afternoon on a Sunday.
Exactly. Without predictability, your brain is just constantly waiting for the jump scare.
Man, that sounds exhausting. So what is actually happening under the hood when we experience that unpredictable, uncontrollable stress?
It initiates a massive biological cascade known as the fight or flight response. The moment your brain perceives a threat, a region called the hypothalamus hits the panic button.
Okay, the hypothalamus is basically the fire alarm.
Exactly. And it activates two parallel systems.
Right.
First, it fires up the sympathetic nervous system, dumping epinephrine and norepinephrine, which we commonly call adrenaline, straight into your bloodstream.
And that's when you feel your heart pounding out of your chest.
Right. Immediately, your heart rate accelerates, your blood pressure spikes, your breathing quickens to pull in more oxygen, and your liver releases stored glucose for instant energy.
So you are physiologically prepped to either punch a bear in the face or sprint away from it.
That's the short-term response. Simultaneously, the hypothalamus activates a slower, longer-lasting backup system called the adrenal cortical system. It sends an activation hormone to your adrenal glands, commanding them to release cortisol.
Ah, cortisol, the famous stress hormone.
Exactly. Cortisol's job is to keep your blood sugar elevated and regulate minerals so your body has the fuel to sustain a prolonged fight for survival. The pioneering researcher Hans Selye mapped this out as the general adaptation syndrome.
And that happens in stages, right?
3 distinct phases, yes. First is the alarm phase, where you mobilize those chemicals. Next is the resistance phase, where your body actively fights the threat. But if the threat never goes away, you enter the final phase, which is exhaustion. Your physical resources are simply depleted.
So bring this to the everyday listener. Say you are sitting in bumper-to-bumper traffic. You're late for a crucial meeting. You have zero control, and the duration is unknown.
A classic modern stressor.
Right. Are your internal alarms pumping out adrenaline and cortisol to fight a bear, but you're just sitting rigidly in the driver's seat of a Honda Civic?
Yes. That is the modern tragedy of the human stress response. You are flooding your engine with high-octane fuel, but the car is in park.
Wow.
We call this allostatic load the cumulative physical wear and tear of chronic overarousal. Because you aren't physically running or fighting to burn off those stress chemicals, they just circulate in your system, causing massive structural damage.
Just from sitting in traffic and stressing out?
Yes. Seeley demonstrated this in early animal studies by exposing subjects to prolonged stressors, like continuous extreme cold. The biological consequences of reaching that exhaustion phase were severe. The animals developed significantly enlarged adrenal glands from overwork, severely shrunken lymph nodes, and deep stomach ulcers.
Wait, shrunken lymph nodes. So the exhaustion phase isn't just feeling tired. It is actively altering your internal organs and shutting down your immune system.
It fundamentally dictates disease progression. There is an entire field called psychoneuroimmunology dedicated to mapping how psychological stress alters immune function.
Psychoneuroimmunology, that's a mouthful, but it makes sense. Mind, nervous system, immune system.
Exactly. To understand the cardiovascular impact, researchers looked at macaque monkeys. Macaques live in highly structured, stable social hierarchies.
Okay, so they know their place in the group.
Right. When researchers deliberately introduced unfamiliar monkeys into established groups, it completely upended their social order, creating a state of chronic, unpredictable social stress. Over a 2-year period, the dominant males in those unstable groups developed severe atherosclerosis.
Meaning dangerously clogged arteries?
Yes, compared to monkeys living in stable, predictable environments.
I always thought getting sick from stress was just, an old wives' tale, or maybe just a result of eating poorly when you're busy. But it's a direct biological mechanism.
It is entirely biological. Consider the common cold. In one remarkable study, researchers took 400 healthy human volunteers, intentionally exposed them to a cold virus using a nasal wash, and then quarantined them.
They just sprayed a cold virus up their noses. That's intense.
It's very controlled. But they found that the individuals who scored the highest on a psychological stress index were almost twice as likely to actually develop cold symptoms compared to the low-stress group.
Here's where that gets really fascinating. It's like your immune system is a massive city police force.
Okay, I like this analogy.
When a major stressor hits, like that looming deadline or the social chaos for those monkeys, The brain pulls every single police officer in the city to manage this one massive parade because it thinks it's a life or death crisis.
Right.
But that leaves the entire rest of the city completely vulnerable to burglars. And the burglars are the viruses and the tumors.
That analogy maps perfectly onto the cellular mechanics. Chronic exposure to cortisol essentially orders your lymphocytes, specifically your T cells, which act as the police force hunting down viruses and mutated cells to stand down.
They literally get told to stop fighting.
Exactly. We see this vividly in oncology studies with rats. Researchers implanted tumor cells into rats, then applied that learned helplessness model we talked about.
With the shocks.
Yes. The rats that received shocks they could control and turn off rejected the tumors 63% of the time. The rats receiving the exact same shocks, but with zero control over them, only rejected the tumors 27% of the time.
That is a massive difference just from the perception of control.
We even see this dynamic in human patients managing HIV. The virus specifically targets immune cells called CD4 cells. Patients who endure severe chronic stress or trauma show a significantly faster drop in those vital CD4 cells, accelerating the progression of the disease. Stress is not just a feeling, it is an immune vulnerability.
Okay, but if the biology of stress is a universal human response, if every single one of us has a hypothalamus and secretes cortisol, why do two people facing the exact same stressor have completely divergent health outcomes?
What do you mean?
Let's go back to that traffic jam. Two people are stuck in the exact same gridlock. One is having a full-blown panic attack, gripping the wheel, and the other is just happily singing along to a podcast or a deep dive.
Well, the divergence happens in the split second before the hypothalamus even wakes up. It comes down to cognitive appraisal and personality.
Cognitive appraisal, how we judge the situation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When an event occurs, your brain does a primary appraisal. Is this a threat to my well-being? Immediately followed by a secondary appraisal. Do I have the resources to handle this?
So the person panicking thinks this is a threat and I can't handle being late.
Yes. Individuals who chronically appraise everyday annoyances as massive threats often fit the profile of the type A personality, a concept identified by cardiologists in the 1950s.
Type A. We always hear that term thrown around for people who are like super organized or ambitious.
Right. While popular culture thinks of type A as just being highly ambitious or impatient, decades of research have refined the definition. The true, biologically lethal component of type A behavior is hostility.
Hostility, meaning viewing the world with a baseline level of anger and suspicion.
Precisely that chronic anger. A fascinating 25-year longitudinal study followed 118 male lawyers, analyzing personality inventories they completed back in university.
So they tracked them for 25 years.
Yes. And the men who scored high in hostility during college were 5 times more likely to die before the age of 50 than their less hostile peers.
5 times, just from being hostile.
5 times. The mechanism is hyperresponsivity. When a hostile person faces a minor challenge, their sympathetic nervous system overreacts wildly.
So their alarm system is just too sensitive.
Way too sensitive. Their blood pressure and heart rate spike dramatically higher than a non-hostile person's, essentially pressure washing the delicate lining of their cardiovascular system with every angry outburst.
Pressure washing your arteries. Yikes. But contrast that hostility with people who possess a trait researchers call hardiness.
Yes, hardiness is a powerful protective factor.
The source material defines this with 3 C's. Commitment, meaning they stay deeply involved in their lives and relationships. Control, meaning they believe their actions matter. And challenge, meaning they view unexpected disruptions as opportunities to adapt rather than catastrophic threats.
Those 3 C's completely change the biological response.
Now, on the surface, this sounds a lot like basic optimism, but I have to ask, is this just an academic endorsement of, toxic positivity?
Stuff, though.
Like, if you just force a smile while your house is burning down and pretend everything is fine, will your T cells magically multiply?
It is a critical distinction to make. No, hardiness is not toxic positivity or willful ignorance. It's about genuine cognitive appraisal.
So you still see the bad stuff.
Yes, an optimist doesn't ignore the burning house. They acknowledge the fire, but they fundamentally believe they have the capacity to navigate the disaster.
So it's the difference between standing in a burning room and saying, everything is totally fine, versus saying, the room is on fire, but I know exactly where the fire extinguisher is.
That is the perfect distinction. Pessimists, conversely, attribute negative events to permanent, pervasive personal flaws.
Like, the room is on fire because I'm an idiot and the whole world is against me.
Exactly. Because they view the world as inherently threatening and themselves as helpless, Pessimists literally run hotter biologically. Studies demonstrate they maintain chronically higher blood pressure throughout a normal
So
day.
constantly simmering.
Furthermore, their appraisal drives behavioral consequences. Believing a situation is hopeless makes a person far less likely to engage in protective health behaviors. Pessimists sleep less, have poorer diets, and use substances like nicotine or alcohol more frequently to cope, which exponentially compounds the physical damage.
But what happens when the stressor is so massive, so objectively catastrophic, that no amount of optimism, hardiness, or fire extinguishers can simply reframe it? I'm talking about war zones or surviving a natural disaster.
When a stressor pushes far past the limits of normal human endurance, the biological alarm system can fundamentally break, leading to post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD.
And we aren't just talking about bad memories here.
No, not at all. The criteria for PTSD describe a nervous system trapped in a loop. It manifests as a person vividly reliving the trauma through intrusive flashbacks, while simultaneously organizing their entire life to avoid any triggers or reminders of the event.
Which has to be exhausting.
It is. Emotionally, they often experience a profound numbing or detachment from others, yet physically, they are trapped in a state of chronic hyperarousal, always scanning for danger, easily startled, and unable to sleep.
The scale of this in the research was staggering.
It is a global phenomenon. Studies looking at survivors of the 2004 tsunami in Southeast Asia, catastrophic earthquakes in Turkey, and combat veterans from conflicts in Bosnia and Afghanistan show massive rates of nervous system dysregulation.
But the research also reveals a fascinating interaction between trauma, culture, and gender, right? The comparison between the different hurricanes.
Yes, exactly. Researchers compare the psychological fallout of Hurricane Paulina in Mexico to Hurricane Andrew in the United States. In both demographics, women experienced higher rates of PTSD than men.
Which is a known trend in the data.
Yes. However, the disparity between Mexican women and Mexican men was vastly wider than the gap between American women and American men.
Oh, interesting.
Furthermore, within the U.S. data, while the gap between non-Hispanic white women and men was significant, African-American women did not suffer significantly higher rates of PTSD than African-American men.
And that points directly to societal expectations and gender roles, doesn't it?
It points directly to our earlier discussion on learned helplessness and control. In cultures or subcultures with rigid traditional gender roles, where women are socially conditioned to be more passive or dependent, a catastrophic disaster leaves them feeling much more helpless.
Because they haven't been given the agency to take control of the situation.
Exactly. When a society strips away a demographic's sense of agency, it drastically increases their biological vulnerability to trauma. In more egalitarian structures, that intense feeling of helplessness is somewhat buffered.
Okay, but biologically, there was a statistic regarding trauma that completely threw me. The text noted that people suffering from severe PTSD often have lower baseline cortisol levels than healthy individuals.
Yes, that often surprises people.
It feels entirely counterintuitive. If their nervous system is trapped in chronic hyperarousal, wouldn't their bloodstream be absolutely flooded with cortisol at all times?
This raises an important question, and it highlights a misunderstood mechanism of the stress cycle. We traditionally think of cortisol purely as the stress hormone that revs up the engine.
Right, the gas pedal.
But cortisol also acts as the brakes. It plays a crucial role in shutting down the sympathetic nervous system after a threat has passed, signaling the brain that it is safe to stand down.
Wait, really? It turns the alarm off.
It does. The prevailing theory is that individuals who develop PTSD might naturally produce less baseline cortisol. Consequently, when a massive trauma ends, their bodies literally do not have enough of the hormone to properly signal the brain that the alarm can be turned off.
So the system's reset button is broken.
Exactly. As a result, the brain remains highly conditioned to fear.
The alarm just rings forever because nobody is there to cut the wire. But, the text also highlighted a psychological phenomenon called finding meaning post-trauma, that even after profound devastation, individuals who eventually reported finding some new purpose or psychological growth actually demonstrated measurable health improvements.
That's incredible.
It literally increased the CD4 white blood cell counts in HIV patients facing severe trauma.
Finding meaning is the ultimate form of cognitive reappraisal. It does not erase or justify the tragedy.
Yeah.
But biologically, assigning meaning to an event signals to the brain that the trauma has been fully processed and categorized.
It puts it in a neat little box so the brain can stop obsessing over it.
Precisely. It finally allows that broken biological alarm to quiet down, taking the brakes off the immune system.
Knowing all of this about the alarm bells, the immune system, the hostility, how do we actively intervene? How do we actively intervene? How do you and I break this cycle in our daily lives before it causes structural damage?
The first step is auditing how you naturally cope. When humans hit a wall, we generally deploy one of two strategies.
Okay, what are they?
Problem-focused coping, where we take active steps to alter the stressful environment, or emotion-focused coping, where we try to manage the terrible distress the situation is causing us.
I feel like I use both depending on the day.
Most people do, and both have their place. But emotion-focused coping can easily become destructive. Avoidance, pretending the threat isn't there, or rumination, obsessively replaying negative thoughts without taking any action, are incredibly dangerous.
The research had a terrifying real-world example of rumination. Women diagnosed with breast cancer who had a tendency to ruminate actually waited an average of 2 full months longer to call a doctor after first discovering a lump, compared to women who didn't ruminate.
Just letting the thoughts spin out of control instead of acting.
2 months of delay, just from getting stuck in their own heads. I like to think of rumination as sitting in your driveway, putting your car in neutral, and pressing the gas pedal to the floor. You are generating massive heat, burning fuel, and causing severe wear and tear on the engine, but you are getting absolutely nowhere.
It is the definition of allostatic load. To counter that, we had to put the car in drive. One of the most effective, accessible tools for this is expressive writing.
Expressive writing, like journaling.
Very similar. The researcher James Pennebaker conducted a landmark study where individuals were asked to write about their most deeply traumatic experiences for just 20 minutes a day for 4 consecutive days.
That's it, just 20 minutes for 4 days.
That was the entire intervention. Compared to a control group, those who simply wrote about their trauma demonstrated significantly stronger immune function and visited health clinics far less frequently over the following months.
Because writing forces you to put the car in drive. When you write, you have to organize chaotic, swirling emotions into a linear narrative with a beginning, middle, and end.
Exactly.
It forces the brain to process the event, which helps you find that meaning we just talked about. But what about the type A personalities, the people running on chronic hostility? Are they just biologically doomed to pressure wash their arteries until they have a heart attack?
They are not doomed because the brain is plastic. There was a phenomenal behavioral modification study involving over 1,000 patients who had already suffered a heart attack. The researchers actively trained these highly impatient, hostile individuals to practice patience through exposure therapy.
How do you expose someone to patience?
They literally assigned them to go to the bank or the grocery store and intentionally stand in the longest possible lines.
Oh my God, that sounds like actual torture for someone who is chronically impatient.
It was incredibly difficult for them. But they were instructed to use that time in line to intentionally observe their surroundings, watch the people around them, and actively suppress the physical urge to explode with anger.
Just breathing through it.
Yes. They were retraining their brain's immediate appraisal of a delay, and the results were undeniable. Over the next 4.5 years, the recurrence of heart attacks in this modified group was cut in half compared to a control group.
Cut in half just from standing in line. Humans possess the unique evolutionary ability to use our highly developed neocortex, our thinking brain, to override the automatic primitive responses of our emotional limbic system.
We can literally outthink our own biology.
The research also laid out the ADPT method as a highly concrete way to use that neocortex.
Right, the ADPT method, a very practical tool.
Let's walk through it. Say you just received a devastating performance review at work. Instead of ruminating, you apply ADPT. First, attitude. You consciously decide this is a problem to be solved, not a permanent catastrophe.
Changing that primary appraisal.
Exactly. Then, define what exactly is the critique in the review. Alternatives. You brainstorm paths forward, like asking for a mentor or taking a course. Predict. You evaluate which of those alternatives will actually help your career. And finally, try you execute the best option.
It takes you out of the passenger seat and puts you behind the wheel.
We are even seeing major corporations operationalize this. General Electric used the internet to roll out their 5, 10, 25 program to thousands of employees globally, teaching these exact behavioral health interventions. The internet is democratizing access to cognitive behavioral tools.
The ADPT method works because it forces a shift in blood flow in the brain. When you engage the logical, problem-solving centers of your neocortex to define alternatives, you send a powerful top-down signal to the hypothalamus that says, I am in control of this situation.
And the moment the hypothalamus receives that signal of control, the alarm bells stop ringing.
Exactly. The physiological stress response shuts down.
So, bringing this all together for you listening right now, stress is a very real, hardwired biological reaction. It is a powerful cascade of chemicals designed to save your life from a predator.
But the severity of its impact in our modern world is almost entirely dictated by how you appraise the threat.
Right. When you see those 32 unread emails, do you view them as an uncontrollable disaster or as a puzzle you have the resources to solve? The next time you are stuck in traffic, gripping the steering wheel, remember that you have the biological power to step back, reevaluate your hostility, and take your foot off your internal gas pedal.
You do not have to let those background apps drain your battery.
You really don't.
And I'll leave you with one final, slightly provocative thought to chew on. We have spent this entire time unpacking the profound damage that chronic stress can inflict on the body.
It is pretty bleak.
It is. But if experiencing and actively navigating manageable stress is the precise mechanism that builds hardiness, cognitive flexibility, and immune resilience, we have to wonder, is a completely frictionless, stress-free life actually dangerous for us?
Wow, that's a flip.
What if stress isn't a bug in the human operating system at all, but a biological software update constantly trying to install stronger resilience protocols? Without it, we might lose our capacity to adapt to this world entirely,